All right, 8-2 day 3. I'll make sure we have that labeled here. Day 3. This is the one and only problem. Really short lesson here. Application question that involves multiplying matrices. You can see I've got some data here, which, that's not what I wanted to do. Believe it or not, I wasn't trying to just draw a squiggly line through it all. If you were to put some brackets on either side, it'd be, you can start to see that this data on these softball expenses for bats, balls, and gloves for the men's and women's team at, I don't know, maybe it's a high school or a college, university, what have you, it would be stored nicely in a matrix. Okay? Now it tells me down at the bottom that each bat costs $80, each ball costs $6, each glove costs $60. Use matrices to find the total cost of each team. Okay? I did not do a good job of leaving a ton of room here, so forgive me for that. I'm going to start over here, and essentially the two matrices that I'm going to multiply are going to be cost times equipment. Now I need a matrix for cost. This is probably the toughest part, is I got to set this up so that it's going to work. Okay? I'm going to go like this and say 80 for a bat, 6 for a ball, 60 for a glove. We talked in day 2 that the order that you multiply matrices are really important, because if it's not in the right order, it very well may not work. Okay? Now the reason I set it up this way and put it first is I'm going to take the equipment matrix and I'm going to leave it as is, because I was looking at that data it gave us and saw it's a 3 by 2. If those match, it'll work. Any other way that you try to set it up, you're going to see that those dimensions don't match. Again, that's the columns of the first and the rows of the second, and you're not going to be able to do it. So when you're setting up the matrices to multiply in a word problem, you might find that there's a little trial and error involved. We might have to set it up one way. The first time I was working through this one, before I had checked my answer on it, I multiplied them in the wrong order. I did equipment times cost, and then my dimensions on the inside were a 1 and a 2, and I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't work. I got to switch the order that I'm doing it. Okay? So don't be surprised if that happens. We had 12, 45, and 15. 15, 38, and 17. Now one interesting little piece you'll see here is, so those 3's match, okay? Those 3's match, so I can do this. My product is going to be a 1 by 2, but you'll see that when we write out this 1 by 2, it actually keeps the units. Okay, right now on this first matrix, that one row, the units are cost. And over here, for the columns, the first column is women, second column is men. And those units will stay. The row will be cost, and the two columns will be the two genders of the teams, and it'll be set up basically perfectly to get what we're looking for. All right, it's time to multiply. So I'm going to get my 1 by 2 here. My first entry is going to be 80 times 12 6 times 45 and then 60 times 15. So that would simplify. I'll get to that down here in a minute. Oh, and then we would have, for the second entry, 80 times 15. If you're noticing the way this is lining up, that's basically the cost for men's bats, right? The men ordered 15 bats, they cost 80. The way these matrices are set up, all these numbers are aligning perfectly. Then we would have 6 times 38. And we'd finish with 60 times 17. Little number crunching there, and our final product would be 2130. And the second part would simplify to 2,448. Okay? Now remember what I said about the units. When we went back to that very first matrix, the row was cost, and here it still is. And on the second matrix, the first column was expenses for the women's team, and then over here was expenses for the men's team. And those units stay. And there's our 1 by 2, which has the costs, or the expenses, excuse me, that each team reported, nicely organized in a 1 by 2 matrix.